The Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes? Greetings. I'm Admiral Owen Swart, Commanding Officer, USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for stardate -269617.1. I am the Admiral in question, and today we're going to be talking about the Command Department. But before we get into that, let's talk about what all of this is. What is the USS Dauntless? What am I talking about? Why am I here? Why am I dressed like this? Various questions like that. Audio check on YouTube is good. Thank you very much, Commander Shamali. I appreciate that. All right, so let's just dive right in and look at what the Dauntless is. There we go. USS Dauntless is a Star Trek fan club based in Cape Town, South Africa. We don't really like the term fan club because although it's not inaccurate, it's definitely incomplete. It doesn't give you a very good picture of who we are or what we do, but it's not wrong. So at our core, I suppose you could say we are a Star Trek fan club, but we're a lot more than that. We'll go into that as we go along. We're a Starfleet style club, complete with ranks, titles, and uniforms. Every member of our group has a rank, which is a form of honorific that we have earned over time. My rank is Admiral, which should tell you that I've been at this a very long time and I've put a lot of work into my Starfleet career. It took me about 22 years, 23 years to earn the rank of Admiral. And my title is, as I mentioned, Commanding Officer. And we're going to get into quite a lot of detail today about exactly what a commanding officer is. And what I'm wearing is a uniform. This isn't my usual uniform. I typically wear the 2373 SDU, which is appropriate for admirals, the admiral variant. And that's not what I'm wearing today. This is the 2258 Kelvin timeline SDU for shipboard use. And I'm wearing this today because it is our alternative uniforms week. Every month in the USS Dauntless for the last week of the month, from the 25th until the end of the month, our crew are invited and encouraged to choose a different uniform than their usual one, as long as it is correct and accurate. So it needs to display the correct color codes and the correct insignia for their rank and title and position. So that's why I'm dressed like this and not in the way that I usually am. And Captain Van Kroonen noted that my beard has returned. Although that's not part of my uniform, it is part of my face, and I'm pleased to present that to you today. We're also a chapter of Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association Incorporated. What is that? So Starfleet is the largest Star Trek fan club in the world, and being one of their chapters connects us to hundreds of other starships and thousands of other members across the world. So Starfleet International is a big umbrella organization that connects hundreds of these smaller Star Trek fan clubs called chapters together into one big organization, which is, as it said, the largest Star Trek fan club in the world. Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association Incorporated, or just Starfleet International, or just Starfleet in all caps. SFI, sometimes also known as that. We are principally an online group, which means that our activities sort of crystallize online. We have a Discord server, and that is the central hub of all of our activity and communications. But we also have in-person activities, which we call away missions, where members of our crew who live relatively close to each other will meet up for activities out in the real world. Some of our most important activities are away missions, so we take those things very seriously. But most of our stuff happens online, and that's where the core of our activity happens, because even on the Dauntless, although we are based in Cape Town, South Africa, we have members in various other cities in various countries around the world as well. As I mentioned, our crew members have the opportunity to earn rank promotions by volunteering for service at the chapter, region, or fleet level, or simply by engaging with their crewmates in day-to-day activities aboard the ship. In other words, our ranks they're not role-playing, that we don't make them up, or that they don't have the same meaning as the equivalent naval ranks. So my rank is Admiral, and I'm not the same as a rank in the Navy. As an Admiral in the Navy, it does have real-world implications. I had to do things in the world. I had to engage in activities over time in order to earn the rank of Admiral. My non-humanoid companion at my ankles is trying to get my attention. He's wandered off. He'll be back. All right, so That's what the USS Dauntless is. What are we here for? Our mission is to bring the message of Gene Roddenberry's vision for the future of humankind to the people of Africa and the Middle East. Why Africa and the Middle East? Well, we are based in Cape Town, South Africa, which means that we are part of Region 8. So Starfleet International has divided the Earth's surface into 20 different geographic regions. Number 8 happens to be Africa and the Middle East, and that's where we are based. We are one of several chapters or starships based here in Region 8, and we take personal and collective responsibility for advancing the vision of Gene Roddenberry's future to that continent. What do we mean by Gene Roddenberry's future? Well, this is Gene Roddenberry, and he is the guy who basically invented Star Trek. He had a vision for a world in which, through cultural, economic, scientific, and technological progress and advancement, humankind has solved most, if not all, of the major issues that we face today. And that world is one that he showed us in Star Trek, in the original series, Next Generation, feature films, and then has been massively expanded upon his initial vision to give us the Star Trek canon that we have today. But Gene Roddenberry is the guy that started it all, and we see that as his vision for an optimistic future in which things are much better than they are today. And we, as Starfleet members, make it our personal mission to try and firstly to spread that message so that other people can also become inspired in the same way that we have, but secondarily to do whatever we can in the world to try and move us towards that optimistic future, to try and bring our world closer to that virtually utopic future that Gene Roddenberry envisioned. So whatever ways we can do that, and we have that mission statement is clarified in a number of standing orders, which I'm not going to go through right now because they don't specifically relate to the command department. Insofar as our mission relates to the command department, it actually reflects the entire mission. So where other departments will pick on one or two of these clarifying points underneath here under the various standing orders, the command department is responsible for this thing, the whole thing. And that is what separates the command department from most other departments on board. So what is a department? Well, here aboard the USS Dauntless, we have, for various organizational reasons, we've broken down the volunteer team of our crew into a number of sort of specialist areas, each one responsible for a different part of life aboard the crew, aboard the ship. And we've now done 6 of these briefing videos looking at these 6 departments: communications, engineering, medical, operations, science, and security. And today we're doing the first and last of those departments, which is command, which will be interesting, I hope, for everybody. So why did we save command for last? Well, because command is it's quite different to the other teams. All of the other teams are laid out in a very similar way, but command is fairly distinct from the others in a number of reasons, and we'll go in a number of ways, and we'll go into how that works right now. Let's look at the command department. So the command department is responsible for keeping the other departments together. The command department is the glue that binds everything together. I've used some sort of biological analogies for some of the other departments, where the operations department is the beating heart of the crew. The medical department is well, I can't even remember what the metaphor was, but there were various metaphors. But if we were to apply a biological metaphor to the command department might be the eyes and the brain, maybe the skin. Okay, I'm getting a little off track here. Command represents the glue that holds the whole group together and sets the course for what the rest of the crew is doing. So if you think about the fictional bridge of a starship, so presumably if you're here, you've watched some Star Trek in the past, and you can think of the bridge crew sitting at their stations. There are typically 2 or 3 members of the command department on the bridge, one of whom is, of course, the commanding officer, who is in charge, the captain. He decides where the ship goes and what needs to be done. There's also a first officer nearby who's there to back up the captain and assist him in various ways. The third person on the bridge, who's usually part of the command department, although this does change in different eras of the Star Trek canon universe, typically the third member of the command department on the bridge is the helm officer. So the person whose job it is to physically steer the ship. So the captain says, make us go that way, and the helm officer presses the button and makes it go that way. So what you're getting from all of these things is that the command department is tasked with deciding what direction the ship as a whole needs to go and making sure that it goes there, if that makes any sense at all. So that's what the command department does. How do we do that? They make sure that things are happening the way they're supposed to. They facilitate meetings and events, make decisions regarding the future of the ship, and represent the ship to Starfleet Command. So that's the command division of Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association Incorporated. The command department is usually where the ship's highest ranking officers will serve. That's typically the case in both in the Navy and also in the fictional Starfleet. In the real world Starfleet and Starfleet International, that isn't necessarily the case because ranks don't confer legal authority over other members. It's just a recognition of time served, of service that you've committed over the course of your career. So it's not inherently a requirement that the highest ranking members of your crew would be in the command department, but it is more likely that people who gravitate towards command are members who have served longer, have seen more action in their Starfleet careers, and are therefore possibly better qualified to serve in one of those positions. It's not always the case. It happens to currently be the case here in the Dauntless. Our two highest ranking members are in the command department, but that needn't necessarily be the case. It has been the case here in the Dauntless where we've had a commanding officer who was not the highest ranking member of the crew. Most of the time it is, but not necessarily. It doesn't inherently have to be that way. New members who have not yet chosen a department to serve in, or which are also known as recruits, are looked after by the command department, but they are not considered members of the department. Recruits are, in effect, a separate group. So those crew members who have joined and are in the process of going through the orientation process, which is usually a 5-day course, but some people take a little longer to get through it, or crew members who have finished their initial orientation and are still deciding where they're going to be assigned on board, because it's up to each member's choice where which department they wish to serve in. As long as they are in that status, they are what we call a recruit. And while they are a recruit, they are looked after by the command department. I beg your pardon, Morsel is looking for my attention. All right, there we go. Just as a matter of interest, that's Morsel. He's ridiculous, and he's hopefully going to go to sleep now. All right. So the recruits are sitting in a pool looked after by the command department, and you'll see how all of that works. But the recruits are not part of the command department. They would, however, wear command red as long as they remain in the recruits pool. So the branch of service for command is red, obviously command, and the uniform color for command officers is red. I'm not wearing my red uniform today because, as I said, I'm wearing a different uniform set, which the color codes are different. But in our normal uniform set, red is for command. And as long as recruits are in the recruit sort of pool, they are looked after by command and are therefore expected to wear red uniforms. Once they choose a different department to transfer into, then their uniform color would change to whatever the appropriate color is for that team, whatever the branch of service color is for the department they move into. But as long as they are recruits, they wear red. So that's why we call them red shirts. Only volunteer duty station holders can be assigned to the command department. So generally speaking, we've got two different kinds of active duty personnel. So active duty personnel aboard the Dauntless are members who are actively engaged, as the name suggests, actively engaged in Dauntless activities. And they are broadly broken down into two different groups. So you've got standard position holders and duty station holders. Duty station holders are our volunteer team who've stepped up and taken on responsibility for making sure that the Dauntless happens for the various different duties that are needed on a daily or weekly or monthly or annual basis in order to assist the Dauntless to keep running along. They duty station holders have committed to us, each have committed to a specific set of deliverables that they have agreed to meet on a regular basis, and that is part of their contribution to the Dauntless, is to volunteer to make sure that everything runs. Other active duty personnel have elected to stay, hopefully temporarily, but for as long as they feel comfortable to do so, as what we call standard position holders. So a standard position is just a title within a given department. So science technician, security technician, medical technician, or anything like that. So it's a generic title that exists within a given department and has no duties assigned to it other than just the generic active duty duties that are required of everybody, which is to attend priority 1 missions and to check in with your department head on a monthly basis. So those apply to everybody. But further than that, there are no specific duties assigned to a standard position holder. What that allows them to do is to be a bit more flexible in how they pitch into the Dauntless activities. It could mean that they don't anticipate that they have the capacity to contribute more actively, or perhaps they can't commit to things in advance, but they are prepared to jump in and help out on any given day, or perhaps they're not prepared to help out yet because they're not yet confident in the space and they want to get to know things a little bit better before they want to take on any responsibilities. All of those things are fine. So standard position holders have no duties assigned. Duty station holders have committed to specific duties. Within the command department, there are no standard position holders. We only have duty stations within the command department. So if you want to serve in command, you want to wear a red uniform, you have to commit to a list of deliverables. And we'll go through those various lists in a moment. So these are, generally speaking, the activities of the command department. Among other things, the command department is responsible for overseeing and facilitating all ships' activities. So what does this look like on a daily basis? That includes approving mission proposals. So if you are an active duty member of the crew and you would like us to embark on a mission of your choice, whether that's a movie night or a hike or a camping trip or a 5K run or paintball or anything that you think would be fun to do together, you can go through and submit a mission proposal. There is a guide. Everybody has seen this during your orientation process, but if you need a refresher, you can head to how to run an away mission on the Dauntless website, and this will give you a thorough guide on how to plan and execute an away mission, or any kind of mission. It doesn't have to be an away mission. We should probably actually update this page to reflect that reality, but there you go. This is where you go to find out how to do that, and it is the command team's responsibility to approve or reject those proposals. So those proposals go to the command team, and we in the command team will have a discussion about whether or not we think that this is something that should go ahead. If we agree that it should, it'll be approved and we'll send it through. We might also have to make some modifications to your mission proposal. We might need to adjust the time, or probably not the location. We wouldn't adjust the location without discussing that with you first. Or if we do have a problem, let's say the mission that you've proposed clashes with an existing mission already on the calendar or something like that, then we'd take it back to you and ask you to adjust the details accordingly. Mission proposals are typically not rejected unless they either already they conflict with another mission that's already on the calendar, especially if it's one of higher priority. There are 3 priority levels for missions. Priority 3 means you're welcome to come, but it's not a big deal. Like the screening for this briefing is a priority 3 mission. People are welcome to attend, but it's not required. Priority 2 means you're expected to attend. It's part of our day-to-day duties of the ship, and everyone is expected to attend them. Priority 1 means it's mandatory. All active duty personnel are required to attend priority 1 missions. So if you submit for example, a proposal for a priority 3 mission that happens to conflict with a priority 2 mission, we're probably not going to approve it, but we will suggest that you maybe shift the time or the date or something like that so that we can have both missions. The other circumstance under which an away mission might be rejected is if it's a personal event, something like a birthday party or a wedding or a bachelor party or something like that. That's something that you should have on your personal time. That shouldn't be a Dauntless event. You're welcome to invite your Dauntless crew members to come to that if you'd like. You would like to have your friends join you, and Dauntless crew members could be your friends if you're so inclined. So you're welcome to invite Dauntless crew members to your personal event, but that doesn't make your personal event an away mission, unfortunately, simply because it's just not fair. Second item is chairing meetings. We don't have meetings very often. I think the last time we had one was 15 years ago or something. But we have the provision on all of our regulations that allows us to have meetings again. So if we feel like it's necessary to have a meeting, we can do so. We have smaller meetings sometimes, like when we're interviewing candidates for the new induction process. That kind of constitutes a meeting. But generally speaking, we don't have many broad chapter meetings where everybody's expected to attend, or department heads are supposed to attend or anything like that. Wouldn't be a bad idea to start doing that again, but we haven't done that for a while. When that happens, it rests on the command personnel to chair those meetings. So whoever the highest ranking member of the command department who is in the meeting should be the chairperson for that meeting, in terms of Robert's Rules of Order. Then organizing gaming activities. So this sounds a little out of place, and that's because we no longer have a gaming department. We used to have one which was called the 360th Marine Strike Group. Starfleet International has an auxiliary service within it called the Starfleet Marine Corps, and we had an embedded unit here on the Dauntless called the 360th Marine Strike Group, the Spirit Riders, and they were responsible for organizing our various gaming related activities. For a lot of organizational related reasons, about a year ago, we decided to shut down the 360th Marine Strike Group and instead incorporate the gaming related activities into the command department for now. We might decide to reinstate a gaming department at some point in the future, but if we were to do so, it wouldn't be the 360th Marine Strike Group. That their responsibility would be different. It would be a new department, probably called Tactical or something like that. And also, we could decide to reinstitute the Marine Strike Group at some point in the future. And if we were to do that, it wouldn't be the gaming department. They would do their own separate stuff. So we merged two things together for a long time, but we decided that wasn't working for us. So we separated them out and shut them both down, at least temporarily. And the stuff that they were doing now falls under the command department for the time being. So that's gaming related activities. Then there is representing Starfleet Command to the Dauntless crew and vice versa. So Starfleet Command is the effectively the Commander Starfleet and the Executive Committee of Starfleet, the International Star Trek Association Incorporated, as well as the regional leadership team. So the Commander Starfleet is the big boss of the whole of Starfleet International. We have an election every 3 years where the membership at large votes for who they think should be the Commander Starfleet for the next term. Once he or she is in office, they will select a team of executives called the Executive Committee who are responsible for different aspects of life in Starfleet. And one of the duties that they are required to do is to manage relationships with all of the chapters in Starfleet, hundreds of chapters. Part of the way that that is managed is through a reporting chain. I did an entire briefing video on reports some time ago. You're welcome to go take a look at that to get a sense of what that looks like. But each chapter is required to submit a monthly report up to the Chief Operations Officer of Starfleet International, or Starfleet Chief of Operations, every month to check in and make sure that everything is going as it should. And it is the command department on the Dauntless, it's our job to submit that report on behalf of our chapter. So that's why it just has one item into there, which is reporting, and that is the MSR, the monthly status report. It's also our job to maintain relationships with Starfleet Command, either whether that's the operations team or whether it's the regional leadership team. Again, we form part of Region 8, and there are some there's an administration and facilitation team there as well, and managing that relationship is also quite important so that we can coordinate task forces and other regional events from time to time. Next is administering personnel, and this is the part of the command department's function that probably takes up the most time. We're busy with this pretty much every day. So that is processing new recruits. When somebody new joins the Dauntless crew, it is the command department's job to get them situated, make sure that they are added to the Discord server, make sure that they have access to all the relevant assets that they need, the email group, the promotion track document, all that kind of thing. That stuff is all generated and assigned to them by the command department. If the command department doesn't provision that stuff themselves, they might put out a work order for the operations department or the engineering department or somebody else, whoever else is relevant, to grant them the necessary access to the tools they need. But it is the command department's job to make sure that those things happen. The onboarding process, I think we did a video on onboarding a while back, so if you want to go learn more about that, you're welcome to. Then there is managing assignments. So whenever somebody wants to become a standard position holder within a given department, or wants to become a duty station holder, a volunteer in any of the other positions on board, it is the command department's job to make sure that that happens, to facilitate that process, whether that's just in the case of a standard position holder, whether that's submitting to the senior staff a question saying, hey guys, do you have any objections to this person taking on this position? And then when the answer comes back, then making the change, actually assigning them to that position. Or in the case of duty stations, it means facilitating the induction process, which is a much more detailed procedure, which we'll go through in a moment. Then there's recognition, which is things like rank promotions, awards, and commendations. At the chapter level, the commanding officer can only grant rank promotions up to a certain level. Beyond that, it then needs to be pushed to Starfleet Command, and it would then be the command department's function to make the nomination or the recommendation to Starfleet Command that should happen. There are also awards. We have awards here in the Dauntless. There are awards in the 8th Fleet in Region 8, and there are awards for Starfleet International. And it's our job to either grant the awards at the chapter level or to submit nominations on your behalf for the other awards at various levels as appropriate. And then commendations are a bit more day-to-day stuff. That's what happens when somebody on the Dauntless does something remarkable. They will receive a commendation in their file, which would then count towards their next rank promotion or possibly their next award. Commendations come out fairly often. So things like if you won the linguistics challenge last month, then you will have received a commendation for that. If you did the fitness challenge, or if you did something really cool on an away mission or something like that, you would likely receive a commendation for that. Or if you commanded an away mission and did a really, really spectacular job, even if it was within the requirements of the job description, but you did really, really well, you might receive a commendation for that, which would then sort of cumulatively add towards your acceleration towards your next rank promotion. Again, up to a point. Then we're overseeing, this is related to that, is career development. So here we're looking at training and induction. Now, training is a thing that is administered primarily by the science department. They are responsible for working with the various skilled people on board the Dauntless to develop training courses to bring people up to speed. But they would do so in collaboration both with the skilled person in question and with the command department. The command department are again setting the course and deciding, okay, well, it looks like we need some extra training in this area. Please, would the two of you work together to build a course accordingly? That kind of thing. And induction, again, this is for duty station holders, which is both an evaluation and a training procedure. Again, we'll go into more detail about what induction looks like in a moment. Then we have issue resolution, which is something nobody enjoys. And this is when issues arise. So whether that's an interpersonal dispute between two different members of the crew, it's the command department's job to help mediate that dispute insofar as it can be done. And then there's also disciplinary actions, which is something we really don't enjoy doing, but we do have some rules, and if people break the rules, sometimes we have to take actions, and that's what that looks like. And then there is managing the USS Dauntless brand. So the brand is basically our perception, our image generated internally, but that other people outside can see. So we want to make sure that we project the right message about who we are and what we do to the outside world. And that takes the form of marketing materials or videos like this one, or whether it's just us walking in the world and looking a certain way. The command department are responsible for managing that brand, again in collaboration with various other stakeholders aboard the crew. So when we're talking about marketing materials, that would mean working with the communications department to make sure that everything looks the way it's supposed to and sends the right message there. If we're talking about uniforms, that means working with the operations department, or at least the quartermaster in the operations department, to make sure that everybody looks the way they're supposed to, and that kind of thing. So the command department are responsible for the brand, but they will farm out some of that work to various other duty station holders on board to help get it done. So who are the people in the command department? So we have a few, as I mentioned, duty stations aboard the command team. First of which is the commanding officer, and that is a handsome fellow there who might look familiar to you. That is the uniform I normally wear. If you haven't seen many of these videos before, that would be my normal SDU, which I wear most of the time. Just the last few days of the month, I'll switch to a different uniform. And that is my title there, the commanding officer, the officer in command of the USS Dauntless, and that's me, Admiral Swart. The commanding officer, or CO, is the president of the USS Dauntless. So the Dauntless is a chapter of a larger organization, Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association Incorporated, which has its own president, that is the Commander Starfleet. But the Dauntless as a chapter is semi-autonomous. And because we are at least partially autonomous, we need to have our own leadership structure, which of course is what we're talking about here. And the person who fills the role of chapter president is the commanding officer. We use the term CO because that is it's a bit more Star Trek like. It fits with the thematic elements that we borrow from the fictional Starfleet. But really, when we talk about the CO or the commanding officer, we mean chapter president. Responsibility for all operational and policy matters finally rests on the shoulders of the CO. So, in other words, everything that needs to be done on the Dauntless, if it's not done by somebody else, it's on my shoulders to make sure that it happens, right? So, we've got a number of duty station positions that are currently vacant, which means that the work is not being done by anybody else. And if nobody steps up to do that work, it means I have to do it, which is why you'll have noticed in a lot of these videos that we've talked about, and we've come across various vacant duty station positions that we found in other departments, and I've said, I'm the one who's doing that work. This is why. It's my job to do it. So if nobody is currently serving as the chief medical officer, I have to do the medical work. If nobody is suddenly currently serving as chief engineering officer, I have to do that work too. So I hope and ask that members of the crew would step up and take on some of that responsibility so that I don't have to do all of it anymore. I would greatly appreciate that, please. Because the CEO is authorized to delegate that responsibility to various other duty stations. So what that tells you is that the CEO is responsible for defining what the various other duty stations on board are and what duties are assigned to them. That's ultimately my responsibility. I'm not going to do that on my own. I'm going to consult with the rest of the command department, with the senior staff. I'm not sure if I've ever actually explained who the senior staff are. I throw that term around a lot. The senior staff are the command department and the department heads and deputy department heads of all the other departments. So those are the highest ranking and most highest ranking members of the crew, the people who have the most responsibility on board. They form part of the senior staff. They're kind of an advisory council to the CEO. So when I have a decision to make about a change to a duty station, if it's more than a cosmetic change, I will submit that suggestion as a discussion point to the senior staff. And once we have something resembling a consensus, I will enact whatever we think collectively is probably the right course of action. It's not a democracy. I generally don't ask for a vote. And if I do ask for a vote, it's only, again, as a suggestion. Within the constitution of the USS Dauntless, the commanding officer is effectively a dictator, but I try to be a benevolent one. My decision is final, and I don't have to actually ask anybody's permission or advice, but I do prefer to ask for advice whenever practical to do so. The CEO is one of 2 duty stations that are mandated by Starfleet, and this position must always be filled by a member of SFI in good standing. So in order to retain our status as a chapter of Starfleet International, we have to, there are 3 requirements that we have to fulfill. We have to have a commanding officer who is assigned, somebody who is qualified, and we'll go through the qualifications in a moment. We have to have an executive officer who is the first officer, the second in command, and we have to have submitted our MSRs. Correction, there's a 4th one. We have to have a minimum number of members, which is 10. So we have to submit our MSR, our monthly status report, every month. We have to have 10 members, and of those 10, 1 must be the commanding officer and 1 must be the executive officer. And when I say 10 members, I don't just mean members of the crew. I mean members who are active, who have a Starfleet membership in good standing and have selected the USS Dauntless as their chapter with SFI. We, as the Dauntless, have many members of our crew who are not members of SFI, and that's perfectly acceptable. Being a member of Starfleet has a small annual membership fee, and we don't feel like it's fair to require that our crew members sign up, but there are a lot of resources that SFI offers, and some of those resources are essential if you want to serve in particular duty station positions. So we retain that there, but again, we need to have 10 SFI members allocated to our chapter in order to retain our status as an active duty chapter. Our monthly status report has to be up to date, and we have to have a CEO and an XO. This position may not be held by an enlisted member. It has to be a commissioned officer. That is a rule by that's a Dauntless rule, by the way. That's not an SFI rule. SFI doesn't care who the CO is as long as they have the relevant qualifications. So what are the duties? So in addition, yeah, this list is not exhaustive, but let's start here and see where we go. All right, so firstly is reporting. Submitting the monthly status report, or MSR, to Starfleet Operations and the regional coordinator on or before the 5th of every calendar month. So this is part of our reporting structure on the Dauntless. So every member of the crew, every active duty member of the crew, is asked to make contact with their department head at least once a month, and we would hope and ask that that contact would take the form of a report, which we call the your crew report, which would list things like which missions you attended that month, which courses you completed through the academy, how much public service time you logged, and any other things you think might be relevant. That would then be given to your department head. Department head would collate all that information into a departmental monthly status report, the DMSR. The DMSRs are submitted to the command team. The command team then sort of collate all of that information down into the MSR, which is sent off to, sent to Starfleet Operations, again, the Chief Operations of Starfleet, and the regional coordinator of Region 8 gets a copy of it. As it happens, I'm also currently the regional coordinator of Region 8, so it's a bit weird because I'm reporting to myself, but you kind of get used to it after 15 years or however long it's been. And that happens every month on the 5th of every calendar month. Then there is policy, which is making all decisions on matters of Dauntless policy and operations that may have a significant, long-lasting effects on the functioning of the ship. As CEO, I'm happy to delegate decisions that are specifically under the purview of a given department to that department head. If they're uncertain about what the decision should be, I'm open to being consulted on the decision. But generally speaking, if it just affects your area, you do whatever you feel like you need to do. But if it affects the entire crew, then it has to come to me. It has to come to the commanding officer so that I'm able to make that decision on behalf of everybody, because that is my job. Again, I'm not going to do it alone. I will ask for consultation, but ultimately I'm the one who has to make the call. Then there's regional representation, which is voting in biannual elections for the regional coordinator. So in the same way that Starfleet International every 3 years selects a new commander Starfleet, Starfleet International requires that our regions have a biannual election for the regional coordinator. The way this works is that chapter members are invited to submit a nomination for somebody in their region that they think would make a regional coordinator. That is sent to the Inspector General of Starfleet. The Inspector General would then collate a list of nominees and present the list to the chapters, the chapter commanding officers for selection. So each chapter will vote on behalf of the members of that chapter to who they think should be the regional coordinator. If it's a tie, then there's some kind of a runoff system. I don't even know how that works. Because frankly, no one has yet run against me as regional coordinator. And again, I think 17 years. Yeah, I think it's 17 years. It's been a very long time. Most of my Starfleet career, I've been serving as regional coordinator, and to date, nobody has yet run against me. Please, somebody run against me. Please take this job. I'm kidding. It's fine. It's not so bad. But it would be nice to see somebody else as regional coordinator for Region 8 someday. Maybe soon. So, as commanding officer, it's my job to submit the Dauntless's nomination and vote for whoever serves as regional coordinator every 2 years when we have our regional elections. Then there is the duty roster. So this is editing and updating and publishing the duty station's specifications. So again, this is part of being responsible for all the work that happens on the chapter. It's my job to decide how all of that work is divided up to the various other duty stations. And that means it's my job to keep the various duty station lists up to date so that all of that work is covered by somebody, because if something doesn't get covered by somebody, then it flows up to me. I'm the one who has to do it then. Then there is promotions, which is approving or rejecting all rank promotions up to the rank of commander. So in terms of Starfleet International's regulations, all rank promotions up to the rank of 05, which is commander, can be operated by the commanding officer of the chapter. For ranks above commander, those now fall under the purview of Starfleet Command. For captain, specifically 06, that is the regional coordinator. He can assign that, who again happens to be me, but the criteria are different. And then for above captain, so that's fleet captain and above, those are only granted by the executive committee. So there is an awards promotions director, I think, who falls under the staff of operations, or is it membership services? I can't remember how it's structured under this administration, but they will collate the list of nominees and present it to the executive committee for a vote whenever they meet, which is once a month, once every 2 months. I don't know, whenever they do it. And then they will decide whether or not the person has earned the rank promotion accordingly. Within the Dauntless, we have a much more complex rank promotion system than Starfleet International has. We have itemized and broken down the things that you can do in order to earn your rank promotions to quite a lot of detail. I've done another video like this going into excruciating detail about the rank promotion system, but for the purposes of today's discussion, it's enough to know that it is the commanding officer's responsibility to maintain that list and to check and see who has earned their rank promotions, and if somebody is nominated, to either forward that nomination onto Starfleet Command or to action the promotion here at our local level, which typically happens in crew evaluations at the end of the month. Then we have assignments, which is approving or rejecting all personnel assignments, whether that's duty stations or standard positions, and that includes facilitation of the induction process for duty station candidates. So when somebody wants to become anything within the Dauntless, whether they just want to be a generic science officer or if they want to become the next second officer, they will submit the relevant application form and they'll go through the process. In the case of a standard position holder, the process is quite simple. That nomination is sent to the senior staff for discussion. If nobody disagrees, then the commanding officer, that's me, will approve and process that promotion, or at least that assignment. If it's for a standard position, if it's for a duty station, then it's much more complicated. Then it goes through the induction process. Typically, the way that goes is it'll first go to the senior staff for discussion. If the senior staff agrees, then it will move on to the interview stage, where the applicant will then have a face-to-face interview with certain other members of the crew, including a representative of the command team. If they're past that, then it goes back to the senior staff for a second round of discussion. If the senior staff agrees, then it goes through to the prerequisites phase, in which we'll go through a list of prerequisites in a moment that a duty station holder is expected to have on application. We'll make sure that all of those are checked off. Once those are complete, we go into the training phase, where the relevant stakeholders on board will assist to teach the applicant how to do the job that they've applied for, go through the various different practical aspects of the job and how that would all work. Once both the applicant and the facilitation team are comfortable that the applicant is ready to do the job, they'll do a series of assessments to make sure to check and test that they are in fact ready. Once the assessments have all been passed, only then will the person be assigned to the position that they have requested all that time ago. And that process can take months, probably would normally take months. There are aspects to the prerequisites phase that can be quite lengthy, and the training can also be fairly complex. And we're quite comfortable with the fact that this takes a long time for a number of reasons. One, just because that's just how it is. And two, because we want to make sure that people have the determination to pull through. So when somebody applies for a position, it's typically because they've gotten all excited about it and they really want to do the work and it's really cool and they've got afternoons free and they've got the capacity and they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And that's great, except that things can change. So we want to see what it looks like 3 months from now, when things aren't quite the same as they were. Maybe you've got family drama, maybe work has gotten hectic at your day job, or maybe you're moving house, or you got a new car, or you're having a baby, or something. Like any number of things can happen in life which can diminish your focus and attention on achieving the goal of obtaining the duty station that you've requested. And we want to see what effect that has on it. Are you still working on it, getting towards that goal, or have you drifted off and taken interest in something else instead? And that's why we make sure that the induction process is anonymous, kind of. It's not really anonymous, but we don't publicize when somebody has joined the induction process for a given position, because it's a learning process both for the applicant and for us, whether or not you're a good fit for the position. And one of the factors is, if after 4 months you've lost interest in the process and you've moved on in a different direction, we've learned that about you and you've learned that about yourself. And then you can abort the process if you want to. You can simply drop out, or we might cancel it on our end depending on the factors of what's happening at the moment, and then nobody has to lose face. It hasn't been announced that you were in induction. Nobody knows outside of the group that we're helping you get there, so it's not embarrassing for you or anybody. We've simply learned what we needed to know, which was whether or not you're a fit for the position. Hopefully that wouldn't happen very often, but it can happen, and that's also why even on this page here, if this position was vacant, it would say vacant right up until the moment that you take on the position, even if there's already somebody in the induction for that position. So that's why that takes a long time. Where was I? Oh yes, brand supervision. Approving or rejecting all marketing material for the USS Dauntless prior to publication or distribution. Although this is generally the rule, we want to see anything that gets published, especially if it goes to one of our external channels, usually through the communications department. It's probably not necessary to review every single piece of material that goes out. I think in terms of my own personal comfort, I would want to make sure that I'm reviewing a campaign as it begins, perhaps the first few pieces of a campaign as the communications department are developing a new way of communicating or sending out particular kinds of material. But once I reach a certain point where like the last 5 or 10 of these pieces that have gone out have met my approval, I'd want to be stepping back from that and allowing the chief communications officer to make those approvals on my behalf. As commanding officer, that is my right to do so. So I'd want to make sure at first that everything is going as it should, but then once I'm comfortable that things are happening as they're supposed to, then I can step back and let the communications team, let the experts do their job without getting in their way. But it is ultimately my responsibility. So if something does go out without my approval, then it's my fault, especially if it's something that shouldn't have gone out. Moderation, which is final editorial control for content of the USS Dauntless website, newsletter, and other publication media, which is basically the same thing here. So if something is on the Dauntless website that's not supposed to be there, somebody's shared a page that should have been hidden, or somebody's made a typo somewhere or something like that, although there are other crew members who are responsible for managing that content, ultimately it's my job. It's my responsibility for making sure that those things are accurate. So if you find a typo on the website, please let communications know, but let me know too, because it's my fault that I missed it. Dispute resolution. So facilitation of dispute resolution between Dauntless crew members. This doesn't happen very often. I think it's happened once or twice in my career as a CO, but it does happen. People are people, and sometimes when you have groups of people, they have disagreements, and it can be difficult to resolve a disagreement on your own. You need to appeal to a third party. As the commanding officer, I am the third party in question, so it would be my job to help you resolve any kind of disputes that might arise. If your dispute is with me, however improbable that might be, then we would appeal to a higher authority. So the next person up would be the regional coordinator, which of course is also me, so that wouldn't help. But then we could then appeal to the next one up. So operations department or membership services or somebody, depending on what the nature of the dispute is. There's always somebody we could appeal to help resolve that dispute. If it gets really, really bad, or if there's some kind of rule breaking in process, then we would have to resort to a different process. But as long as it's just an interpersonal dispute, then we can try and resolve it through mediation. And here, that brings me to the next point, which is discipline, which is allocating consequences of counterproductive crew activity, including reprimands, rank demotions, and advancement exclusions. So this, again, is not a fun thing to have to do, but we do have rules, and there need to be consequences if the rules are broken. Whether that rule is failing to report in for priority 1 mission, or sharing somebody's information inappropriately, or being rude to somebody on a call, or something like that. There are rules about how these things are done, and most of those rules have embedded within them what the consequences might be. I typically, if somebody is misbehaving, I'd like to resolve it by simply having a conversation with a person, maybe deleting an offending post off somewhere. But if someone really is resolute about their misbehavior, then I have to take steps to protect the rest of the crew from that person's bad behavior. And that might be sending that person a message by reducing their rank, or excluding them from advancement opportunities for a period. So that would be something like a fail to report in flag on their record, or it might simply be by removing somebody from the crew who is behaving in such a way that they can't be part of the group anymore. Again, it doesn't happen very often, but it happens, and it's the unfortunate duty of the command team to have to deal with that. So chair, and that is chairing of all official Dauntless meetings. Again, we don't have those very often, but when insofar as we were to have one, it would be my responsibility to be the chairperson of that meeting. And then there's officer of the watch, which is something that applies to most senior duty stations, and that is keeping an eye on communications channels whenever appropriate to do so. So whether it's Discord, whether it's our Facebook group, our Goodreads group, our LinkedIn group, or anything like that, we just want to keep an eye, make sure that nobody posts anything that they shouldn't in one of those places. Again, it doesn't happen very often, but people are people, and maybe you posted something in the wrong place and it's something that doesn't belong there, or maybe you said something that could be misinterpreted. Something like that, or somebody just used a naughty word, that's fine too. Then it would be up to one of the officers of the watch to step in and take action, whether it's removing the offending post, having a word with the person who posted it, or just maybe the thing you do is making a judgment call that actually doesn't matter and moving on with your day. But we have to be vigilant about that kind of thing. So there are several officers of the watch who are keeping an eye on those kinds of things just in case. Then there is fleet operations. So that is collaborating and coordinating with command communities within Region 8 and Starfleet International. So that's kind of baked into the day-to-day function of the commanding officer, which is maintaining relationships both with the command team of Region 8, which is the regional coordinator, happens to be myself, but when it's not myself, it might be whoever the other RC is, and also the rest of the command team. There's a whole staff over at Region 8, and they have duties too, and we want to make sure we maintain a good relationship with them. as the USS Dauntless, and then with Starfleet International. So it goes beyond simply filing the monthly status report every month. It's also about making sure that we are kept abreast of what's happening over at Starfleet Command, and informing both the crew of what's happening there, and also informing Starfleet Command of what's happening with the crew. If the crew have any concerns or complaints about Starfleet International, it rests on the CEO's shoulders to bring that to the attention of the relevant people through the chain of command. Then there's delegation, which is performing any and all duties the executive officer is unable to perform. So this is how this works. Once you've delegated all those responsibilities to the various other duty stations, if a duty station is vacant, or if that person is not able to perform their duties today for whatever reason, they're too busy or they're sick or whatever, then that work flows up the pyramid all the way to the top. And the last person, the buck stops with me. If the work doesn't get done by me, it doesn't get done. Hopefully, I'm able to find somebody to help me do the work, but more often than not, I just do it myself. So the commanding officer reports to the regional coordinator, reports to the RC and Starfleet operations, but technically speaking, the next one up the ladder is the regional coordinator. And these are the qualifications that somebody should have in order to be considered for commanding officer. So the appointment for commanding officer works differently than most of the duty stations. It would only be advertised as being available if the current CO is looking to step down. And then we might advertise it as being vacant, and we'd see who would be interested in doing it. But there's no reason we wouldn't run it through the standard induction process. So this is what a candidate CO would need to have. In order to be considered, the applicant must already be an active participant in a bare minimum of 50% of all USS Dauntless activities measured over a 3-month time frame. Even though the command department does run some of its own activities, specifically gaming-related activities, because of the nature of the command department being involved in every part of life aboard the Dauntless, this needs to cover all Dauntless activities. So 50% of all Dauntless activities measured over a 3-month time frame. So that includes online and in-person activities, as well as monthly challenges. So that's the linguistics, combat training, reading, fitness challenges, at least 50% every month. And that is measured over a 3-month time frame, and each category is measured separately. So we'll check whether you've done 50% of the online activities, 50% of the in-person activities, and 50% of the challenges over the last 3 months. Applicant must also be an active user of Discord, Google Workspace, Trello, Google Sites, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Meta Business Suite, YouTube Creator Studio, and Star Trek Online. These are the most important tools that we use here on the Dauntless. We'd use a few others, but these are the most important ones, and so the CO must be conversant in all of these platforms in order to be able to do the work from the other teams if they're not able to do it themselves. Then, in order to qualify for the position, the applicant needs to have grade 05, which is commander or higher. That's something that you can earn here on the Dauntless. You need to have completed Officers Training School, OTS, through Starfleet Educational Services. You need this in order to get this. You wouldn't be a commissioned officer unless you already had Officers Training School. You need Officers Command College, or the OCC, also through Starfleet Educational Services. These two are requirements from Starfleet International. No commanding officer can take that position without completing these two, and this one as well, actually, by the way. So these 3 courses are now mandatory requirements for all COs. So you need the Officers Command College. It's a much more complicated exam than the Officers Training School. The OTS is very simple. You can do this in the first afternoon that you join Starfleet International. This one's going to take you a little bit longer. It's got some essay questions and that kind of thing. It requires you to think a lot more. And then there's the Starfleet Data Protection Policy, SFDPP. So this relates to various international laws about how personal identifying information, PII, is handled by institutions that have to do that kind of thing. And as the CO, you have to handle a lot of PII, so you need to be qualified to do so. And luckily, Starfleet Educational Services offers a certification that will teach you how to do that. This has to be kept up to date. It has to be renewed annually. The Starfleet Educational Services releases a catch-up exam, a renewal exam that you can complete every year. If you don't complete that, then you will Starfleet International will remove you as commanding officer of the chapter. Like you don't even have a choice. You have to do it. The rest of these are Dauntless specific requirements. So the next one is Bridge Officer Certification Commanding Officer, also through Starfleet Educational Services. This is not a single course. This is a collection of courses. You do a bunch of electives, and once you've got enough of them, then you're granted the certificate. It includes these 3, I think, and then a bunch of other courses. It's more about the conceptual understanding of what a commanding officer is within the context of the fictional Starfleet within Star Trek, and how that role relates to the real world. So as this role grows and develops over time, what would that look like? What kinds of things are likely to be incorporated under the position of commanding officer? What does a commanding officer have to do in the fictional world as well as in the real world? And sort of understanding that sort of theoretical background behind the position, as opposed to more day-to-day practical stuff. You need to have an active membership to Starfleet in good standing. That is non-negotiable. Again, if you allow your membership to lapse, Starfleet will remove you as CEO of the chapter, which is an emergency. You need to have a correct and accurate standard duty uniform, your SDU. Again, I'm not wearing mine today. Oh, I suppose technically this is a correct and accurate SDU, but it's not the usual one. The usual one that would meet this requirement is my normal daily uniform, which I showed you. It's the one I'm wearing in this photograph here. It's the one I usually wear when I'm doing these. Next, you need to have completed the new recruit orientation course. All active duty members of the crew have to complete that on the Dauntless. You need to have completed the onboarding protocol certification. So we have a protocol dictating or detailing how we bring new members on board, the various things that need to be done, the various things that need to be checked off and completed. And we have a certification, a quick exam that helps members of the crew who are involved in that process get signed off to do it. And so if you want to be the CEO, you have to know how to do that. And then required within 6 months of appointment to the position is the PD 100 certification. That is the Starfleet Marine Training Center's Professional Development Level 1, which is, I think everybody should take it. I think it's quite important. The privileges of being a commanding officer is that on appointment, the CEO is granted a conditional promotion to the grade of 06 or captain, and after holding the position for 6 continuous months, the promotion becomes permanent. So if you become CEO today and you're promoted to captain, but 3 months from now you decide you can't do the job anymore and you quit, then you jump back to your previous rank, whatever that might have been. If your rank is already above captain, which is not unlikely, then you keep the rank you already had. Upon leaving the position, the outgoing CEO may select his or her own replacement. So that is ultimately the conclusion of an induction process. If you wanted to become the new CEO, is that when the CEO is satisfied that you are ready to take on that position, he or she would step down and appoint you as their replacement. There's no vote, there's no election, that kind of thing. The Dauntless constitution doesn't provide for any kind of election. If the chapter was to have a chapter election, Starfleet International's Inspector General would have to get involved in that election. But since we don't have a democratic system here on the Dauntless, there's no need for that. Chapters are allowed to choose their own method for selecting their leadership crew. And that is ours. You are nominated by your predecessor. I was nominated by my predecessor, the now Admiral Kim Donahoe, and she was nominated by her predecessor, the now Admiral Tom Donahoe. All right, next up is the executive officer, also known in Star Trek as the first officer. Here we use the military term executive officer, or XO, which is currently filled by Fleet Captain Chris Lynch. The XO is the vice president of the Dauntless. XO is one of 2 duty stations that are mandated by Starfleet, and this position must always be filled by a member of SFI in good standing. Again, that's non-negotiable. SFI requires that. This position may not be held by an enlisted member. That is a Dauntless requirement, not Starfleet International. SFI doesn't care what rank you hold as long as you have the relevant qualifications. But in the Dauntless, we don't want the XO to be held by an enlisted member. The executive officer is the department head for the command department. So typically the number one position within a department would be the department head, but because the commanding officer has got a lot of other stuff on his plate already, we leave that to the XO to serve as the command as the department head for the command department. And what does that look like? It looks like this. So the duties of the XO include crew evaluations, that's tracking rank promotions and awards eligibility for the crew, and informing the CO when a crew member becomes eligible. This is something that gets done on a monthly basis. The command team go through all the various reports and that kind of information and decide who is eligible for promotion. And then the CO and the XO together will decide who actually gets promoted. I've done a whole video on the crew evaluations process. It's quite a lengthy procedure. I recommend going back and looking at that if you're interested. What does that look like? What does that report look like? I've got a copy of it here. I've grayed out everybody's names, but you can see what that looks like here. So we've got a list of the entire crew, everybody's positions, what their departments, what away teams, and then relevant metrics like how many missions they've attended, how many of those missions were attended in uniform, how many of those missions they commanded, how many courses they completed, whether that's through Starfleet Academy, whether it's through our onboarding, it's our onboard certification process, or whether it's through third parties. So maybe you got your driver's license or you got your level 1 first aid certificate or whatever, that would go here as long as you've let us know about it. Then here we have commendations. So if you've won a challenge for the month, like linguistics or the fitness challenge, then that would be listed here. It would also be referred to then on your promotion track document. Each member of the crew, each active duty member of the crew has a promotion track document, which helps track your progress towards your next promotion. How many public service hours you've logged, and what your status is at the end of this month. So not applicable is my status because I cannot be promoted anymore. I'm Admiral now. That's as high as it gets, except for Fleet Admiral, but you can only become a Fleet Admiral by serving as the Commander Starfleet, and that's not one of my career aspirations. I cannot be promoted from Admiral. Uh, we have ineligible people who are, for whatever reason, cannot be promoted either. I got non-select means that as of this month, you haven't been promoted for submitted for promotion. We're not expecting promotion for you this month. And then some people who are nominated, so they have been put forward for promotion, which may or may not happen depending on how the command team decides to proceed with that. So that's what the crew evaluations report. That's the final report, but there's a lot of work that goes into generating this report. And again, we did an entire video looking at that not that long ago. And it's the XO's job to present that report. Going into that is collating the reports from the various other departments. So that's the DMSRs, as well as submitting the DMSR on behalf of the command department. So the command department has to submit a DMSR2 that goes into this collated report, which is then sent to the CO, and then the CO generates the MSR. But if the CO is not able to, for whatever reason, if I'm sick or I'm away or I'm whatever, then the XO can do that on my behalf. The XO has the necessary access to the Starfleet database to be able to submit the MSR as needed, but it's the CO's function generally to do that. And most of these here are just redundancies. So this is doing stuff that the CO should do under normal circumstances, but if the CO can't do them, then the XO needs to stand up and do that stuff on the CO's behalf. So that's a lot of the duties that the CO would normally do. The one thing that the XO cannot do without the CO's involvement is making policy decisions. So any kind of decision that affects the long-term running of the ship, the XO would not be able to make that decision without the CO and would need to wait until the CO becomes available again. XO obviously reports to the commanding officer. Qualification list is very similar. The only real difference here between these two is that the XO needs to have the bridge officer certification for executive officer, which is quite similar to the CO's one. And then within 6 months of appointment to the XO position, they need to have the bridge officer certification commanding officer. Again, this is the sort of conceptual certification that governs why the position exists and what it looks like and how it develops over time. Changes here are that upon appointment, the XO is granted conditional promotion to the grade of Commander 05, and after holding the position for 6 months, the promotion becomes permanent. And when the CO position becomes vacant, the XO is automatically considered an applicant for the position, regardless of his or her qualifications. So would then, well, in fact, if the position becomes vacant, somebody automatically has to fill that, and in terms of Starfleet regulations, and the XO, because the qualifications are so similar to that of the CO, the XO would probably then also be qualified to fill that position. So if something were to happen to me and I'm no longer able to serve as XO, as CO, then the XO would pretty much automatically be pushed up to CO, and then we'd have to find a new XO to replace him. It's not very likely, but it could happen. Who might that be? Well, the next person down on the ladder is the second officer, who we currently don't have. Second officer is the junior vice president of the Dauntless, and this position may only be held by a member of SFI in good standing. That is a Dauntless rule. That's not an SFI rule, but we require that. If held by an enlisted member, the title is Command Master Chief. So this position can be held by an enlisted member. So that's somebody who's a Master Chief or something like that. That would be A Command Master Chief would be the name for that position. This position may be held as a secondary position by a department head of the USS Dauntless. So if you are already a department head, then you may also take on as a second position, second officer. In fact, that was my position. When I joined the Dauntless crew back when we launched back in 2004, I was the chief science officer. After a year or two, I was appointed as second officer. So I was both chief science officer and second officer at the same time. Then I was promoted up to executive officer. So I dropped my chief science officer position and made that available to somebody else. But that's how that works. So if you're a department head, you can also be the second officer if you want. What does the second officer do? Well, reserves command. So this is the thing that the second officer does that's different to the rest of the command crew. So what are reserves? So a reserve is somebody who used to be an active duty personnel, but has decided to withdraw from being active for whatever reason. Maybe it was just busier than you thought, or you didn't have time to commit to the Dauntless, or maybe you're taking a break from things, or whatever. If you are a reserve, it means you are a member of the Dauntless crew, basically on paper only. You're not expected to attend any events. You're not involved in our day-to-day operations. You have access to the Dauntless Discord server, but you're not required to be on there. No, that's not correct. That is now different. You are required to be on the Dauntless Discord server. If you are a reserve, you have to be on Discord, but that is the only requirement. You can mute the server and never communicate with us on there if you want, but if you want to retain your status as a reserve member, you have to be on the Dauntless Discord. And then that's it. Reserves have nothing expected of them. They're not even required to attend Priority 1 missions. They are welcome to attend, but not required. Since they don't fall under any department, the second officer is responsible for looking after the reserves. What does that mean? That means maintaining open lines of communication with them. Unlike with active duty personnel who are expected to check in every month, reserves are only expected to check in once a year. And all they need to tell us is, yes, please, I'm still alive. I'd like to stay as a member of the Dauntless. That's it. End of conversation. We don't need anything more than that from reserves. If they want more, no, that's great, but that's the minimum level of interaction that we require from reserves. So that means logging participation. So if reserves do participate in anything, then the second officer needs to log that. Maintain open lines of communication, as I mentioned, representing the interests of reserves in senior staff discussions and policy decisions. So when we're having those kinds of discussions within the senior staff and when policy decisions are about to be made, somebody needs to represent the interests of reserves, needs to advocate for them in case that new policy has some kind of an effect on them. Then in that case, it would be the second officer's job to represent reserves in that case. Facilitating crew member transitions into and out of the reserves pool. So if somebody was active duty and they've decided for whatever reason they want to become a reserve, it's the second officer's role to assist them doing that. Or if somebody was a reserve for a while and they want to return to active duty, again, it would be the second officer who would assist them in making that transition back in again. Performing an annual review of activity of all current reserves. So instead of checking in every month, again, the second officer checks in every year, and once a year, they will go back and check to see who or which out of the reserves have had any kind of interaction with any of us during the year. We'll mark them as good for another year. Those who we haven't heard from in the last year, he will reach out and make contact. Pardon me, I need a sip of my beverage. There we go. Sorry about that. So performing an annual review of all current reserves. Next we have, well, the rest of these things are all being the second or the junior vice president of the chapter. So if the CEO can't do a thing and the XO can't do the thing, then the second officer can step up and do some of those things. So that those things would include dispute resolution, would be chairing meetings, would be helping to collate the reports, serving as officer of the watch, and helping with delegation. The second officer reports to the executive officer, who is, of course, the department head for the command department. And what are the qualifications? These are very similar, again, to the CEO and the XO. The difference here is the minimum grade required is lieutenant. It's not commander. OTS, OCC, SFDPP, those are all requirements. Bridge officer certification, there is a separate certification for second officer, but we recommend that you get the executive officer certification within 6 months of signing up. Need to have an active staff lead membership so that you can keep your SFDPP certification up to date. You need to have that standard duty uniform, the new recruit orientation course, and onboarding protocol because you might need to help with onboarding. If you are an enlisted member, the requirements are slightly different. You need to have a minimum rank of petty officer first class. You need to have the new recruit orientation, the onboarding protocol, and then We should have the SFDPP in here. This is out of date. My apologies. It's my responsibility to update that, and I will do so. So we need to have the SFDPP requirement in there as well. But not necessarily with on the day of appointment. So we would put the SFDPP requirement in this list here, required within 6 months of appointment to the position. The Command Master Chief can advocate for the rights of the reserves without having access to their PII, can reach out to them via Discord, again without having access to their email account. So that kind of thing. The Command Master Chief can do some of the duties of the second officer without having that access, but we would want to ramp up that access and give you the SFDPP certification so that you can access the PII as needed. So what are the privileges? As second officer, upon appointment, the SO is granted conditional promotion to the grade of 04, which is Lieutenant Commander, which then becomes permanent. When the XO position becomes vacant, the SO is automatically considered an applicant for the position. And for the Command Master Chief, they get the position of Master Chief Petty Officer, which is the highest enlisted rank. So if you'd like to jump directly from Petty Officer second class or whatever, all the way up to Master Chief Petty Officer, you can do that by becoming the second officer. Next, we have the Recruiting Officer, which is also currently vacant. Please apply here. Just because it's vacant, again, doesn't mean that there isn't somebody currently in the induction process looking to become this position, but it does mean we are accepting applications. If you were to apply for it and we did have someone ahead of you in the queue, we would have that conversation with you after you've applied, and we'd try and figure out another way for you to contribute. Recruiting officer is responsible for processing membership applications and assisting with the orientation of new members of the Dauntless. If you've joined the crew at any point in the last 4 or 5 years, you will have interacted with somebody acting as the recruiting officer. The RO also acts as an effective department head for recruits until they are assigned to a department. This can be held by an enlisted member, and if so, it would be as the recruiting non-commissioned officer, RNCO. So what does the recruiting officer do? They manage onboarding, which is managing applications for new members and facilitating their joining of the crew by means of the onboarding protocol. So I spoke about that onboarding protocol earlier. The recruiting officer owns that protocol and would typically be the one performing that onboarding procedure. Other members of the command team can do that if the recruiting officer isn't available, but it is the recruiting officer's function to perform the onboarding. Recruits management. So again, recruits are members who are active duty but haven't yet selected where they want to go. So this is a group of members who are looked after by the command department but don't actually form part of the command department. The recruiting officer acts as a department head for the recruits. So he would make contact with them every month. He would solicit their reports, and he would look after them as if they were a department. Not a department, but kind of sort of acts like a department. Recruiting officer's job to look after the recruits. The recruiting officer would run new recruits through the new member orientation course, and that's something that happens on Discord. It's a text-based conversation. It's usually a 5-day course, although some people take a little longer to complete it. It's the recruiting officer's job to facilitate that course. It doesn't have to be via Discord. Discord is our preferred method for managing it, but it can be via email or face-to-face conversation or any other medium as is appropriate, but it's designed to run by Discord. Then there's career counseling. So this is counseling recruits who don't have a clear idea of where they want to go within the Dauntless crew, which department they'd like to serve in, what they would like their Starfleet career to look like. So the recruiting officer would serve as somebody to talk to about those kinds of things, help them, guide them, provide them with necessary information in order to help make the decisions they need to make. Then we have a thing called extended orientation. So this is for recruits who have completed orientation, but they just can't decide where they want to go. So the extended orientation program allows those new recruits to be temporarily assigned to each department in the crew. So they'll start with communications, and then medical, and then security and engineering. Spend 2 weeks in each department, get a sense of what happens in that department. Once they've got through the full rotation, they'll then go back to the beginning again. They might need to go through the rotation a couple of times until they've made up their choice. I think at the moment we have one recruit who's currently in extended orientation. But that's what that looks like. So in order to help that member decide, they might need to try out the various different departments until they're ready to make a decision. Roll call is maintaining open lines of communication with recruits. That's standard department head stuff, as well as reporting. Even though the recruits pool is not a department, officially speaking, they still are expected to submit a DMSR, Departmental Monthly Status Report, so that the members of the recruits pool are reflected in a DMSR, even though they're not technically a department. Officer of the Watch is standard, and fleet operations, we expect the recruiting officer to coordinate with recruiting and retention communities within Region 8 and Starfleet International. SFI has a pretty extensive recruiting and retention community on board where they discuss how to recruit new members, how to make sure that members don't leave and look after them and that kind of thing. That's the thing that the recruiting officer would be involved in. The RO reports to the XO. And these requirements, again, are fairly similar to the second officer. Need to be a lieutenant. You need to have completed OTS, the SFDPP, because you're going to be dealing with PII. You need to have an active membership in staff lead in good standing so that you can keep your SFDPP up to date. The SDU is essential. The new recruit orientation course, you obviously need to have taken the course before you're administering other people. Onboarding protocol certification is again essential because the recruiting officer owns that process. And then the PD100 certification at some point within the next 6 months. The recruiting NCO has very similar requirements. The only real difference is the rank requirement. Privileges upon appointment, the recruiting officer is granted conditional promotion to lieutenant commander, which is a pretty senior rank, and the non-commissioned officer becomes a senior chief petty officer, which is one rank below master chief. There is a deputy recruiting officer, which, as you might imagine, is the assistant to the recruiting officer. I'm not going to go through these in detail because all of these have already been covered. The deputy recruiting officer is there to assist the recruiting officer if they're not able to keep up with their duties. There is one non-humanoid crew member in the command department, and that is the emergency recruiting hologram, which you may have interacted with if you've joined us in the last year or so. And he is a semi-automated Discord bot designed as a short-term supplement to the command staff. His capabilities vary based on current requirements, and he may be controlled by other members of the senior staff as needed. So because the recruiting officer position is currently vacant, we have the emergency recruiting hologram facilitate the onboarding, not the onboarding protocol, but the orientation protocol. One moment. Sorry, Morsel's just being a pain. What that means is typically another member of the senior staff will log into that account and then click the button that puts the next day of the 5-day orientation course in the relevant thread. So semi-automated, somebody has to log in and push the button, but he has no thought or mind of his own. He is being controlled by another member of the crew. Maybe someday we'll upgrade him so that he can be more automated and interactive. We're hoping to someday replace him with something like a hologram Janeway from Star Trek Prodigy and an emergency training hologram. But for now, he's nowhere near as sophisticated as that. And large language model bots like our EMH are not reliable enough for this kind of work yet. All right, so that is the command department in a nutshell. Let us switch back to this. This has been quite a lengthy one. We're already over an hour 15. This is a record. This is a record. So let's look at comments and description and questions. We've had a lot of discussion in the chat. Let's see. Let me say hi to everyone who's here. We've got Senior Chief Newton, we've got Petty Officer Matthews, Lieutenant Commander Shamali, and Captain Van Kroonen. I saw Colonel Yubert was here, but she had to drop off, obviously, because this has been a long one. Incidentally, if you are an active duty member of the crew and you'd like to join us for these recording sessions, you may do so in the screening room in the Dauntless Discord server. Nobody's required to attend these. This is a priority 3 mission, which means you're welcome, but not expected. But if you'd like to participate actively, then please do so. It's a bit of an awkward time, middle of the day on a Tuesday, and I know most people work, so it's not really convenient. But if you are able to join us, please do. If you're not an active duty member of the Dauntless, you're welcome to join us on YouTube. We stream the session live there as well. I am able to sometimes see comments and questions coming in from YouTube, although that system is a little bit unreliable. It does work from time to time, so I can take questions from there too. Otherwise, if you're looking at this after the fact, you can find these videos again on YouTube or on Facebook, and you're welcome to ask questions in the comment section there, or just reach out to me directly, and I'll either try to address your question there or then, or perhaps feature it in an upcoming video in the briefing series. All right, so everybody's greeting Morsel. That's great. Commander Shamali says the YouTube sound is great. Perfect. That's commenting on the beard. Yes, the beard is back. I had to shave my beard a little while ago, but it's now pretty much back to what it's supposed to look like. Commander Shamali says command is the melted marshmallow of the departments. She's referring to my hand gesture of the command. Yes. Okay. I see what you're saying there. That's in the s'mores, right? Yeah. Okay. Comms is the chocolate. That's a good metaphor. All right. Yes. Comms is the chocolate in the s'mores. Nice. For now. Science calls dibs on the bottom cookie. Okay. I think we're getting off track here with this s'mores metaphor. I'm not really sure what's happening there. Okay, everybody's saying hi to Morsel. There's a gif of a cat. There's a gif of a soldier lying there. Oh, that's Colonel Yubert pointing out that she is a Marine. Yes, Colonel Yubert is our resident Marine. Let's see, we've got the EMH is causing trouble. Colonel Yubert says, I only became a Marine because I'm a gamer. I'm here now that and I'm here that, and I'm a gamer, and here we are now. I'm committed. Yes. So, as I said, the Marines were responsible for our gaming activities at one point. That's not currently the case, but Colonel Yubert is still very active in the tactical side of things, which is not currently a department, but we might decide to make it a department again at some point in the future if it works out that way. Captain Bakuna says, at least you're breathing. Yes, that's good. Oh, that's because Shimali was in tears responding to something that the EMH had said. Okay, that's fine. Lots of animated GIFs. People are saluting. Terrible timing. I don't know what that's about. It's perfect from my perspective. Okay, good. Senior Chief Newton is the Admiral's alter ego named Gary Mitchell. I admit to nothing. EMH causing more trouble. More fun gifts. Commander Shmali says, life is rough. I was feeling so cold right up until the baby thing. You, Diff's not talking about me. Oh, she's talking about the induction process. Yeah, that's right. I mean, life happens. There are all kinds of things that can happen during an induction process. But what we want to see is how inductees respond to difficulties that arise in real life. Well, that's one of many things that we're looking at. But that's one of the reasons we're comfortable with the process taking a long time is that happens. And sometimes when you're in the frame of mind where you're signing up for a position, you're not in that frame of mind 3 months down the line. And we want to see if you're still able to keep up with it, because the work still needs to be done, even if you are even if you've just had a baby, or even if you just got a new puppy or whatever. When something else is taking up your time, the work still needs to happen. So hopefully you'll be able to keep doing that. Commander Shwali says, oh, I don't know, many of us have played Star Trek CCG versus you, Admiral. When do we get to fight them? Oh, okay, so we're talking about personal dispute resolution. Yes, so I suppose we could always say that Star Trek CCG could be the official dispute resolution strategy for the Dauntless. That might be fun. You'd have to duke it out in cards. I've actually been trying to figure out how to do one of these briefing sessions about Star Trek CCG. I've got some technical investigation to do, but I think that could be fun for an upcoming one of these. When do we get to fight them? I mean, play video games with them. Yes, yeah, fighting, sure. If you're part of the combat training challenge, then maybe we can have a fisticuffs to resolve personal disputes. No, not really. That's not how we do things, but it might be fun. Commander Shabali saw her row on the crew evaluations report. Excellent. Colonel Bear is heading out. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, good. Oh, Commander Shumai wants to fight the rest of Region 8. That's a good idea, actually. We should organize a regional summit, and then we can just have a big brawl. That could be amusing. All right. Okay, there we go. So, fisticuffs. No, fisticuffs. Fisticuffs, as in Queensbury rules. All right. Okay. This one is by far the longest briefing to date. I was afraid that it might get this long, and there's even stuff I didn't go into in very much detail. Turns out command department is the most complicated department, but that's why I kept it till last. All right, so I'm going to call it here. Thank you everybody for joining us here today. I'd just like to say one thing, and that is that the command department of the Dauntless is looking for dedicated volunteers to fill key leadership roles. As you saw, we've got a number of vacancies in the command department, and they are very vital to the operations of the ship as a whole. Serving as a GT station holder in command allows you to shape the future of this community, lead fellow crew members, and advance rapidly through the ranks. Apply today and help the USS Dauntless on her mission to promote the ideals of Star Trek in Region 8 and beyond. Thank you. That is all for today. You are dismissed. Swart out.